Hi, this is Bob Piorun, and I'd like to do a video. This will be part one on the blues. Well, the blues is a lot of things. It's how you feel on Monday morning. If you're a kid and you got to get up and go to school, or an adult and you got to get up and go to work. So I think most of us know what that is. Then the blues is a style of music that we had Albert King, B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan played, a genre of music. But today I'd like to talk about the blues progression. Now, a lot of people think they know what this is until they possibly have to sit down and explain it to someone. Being a teacher for over 50 years, when you have to explain this to people, then you get it formulated in your mind in some organized fashion. At first, I hear people say all kinds of things. Well, it's 1-4-5. Well, 1-4-5 could be 1-4-5 could be twist and shout or La Bamba. 1-4-5 does enter into it, but in a basic way, which we'll look at right in a minute. The blues could be as simple as a 3-chord progression, the basic blues, or it could be as in bebop. That's a blues too. So the blues is actually many things. What people have done is taken this basic chord progression that works very well and made a lot of different things out of it. Today we'll look at some of the basic things and some of the famous songs that use it. I tell my students to really understand and be able to play the blues because, first and foremost, there's without doubt more songs based on the blues in our music, Western music, than any other chord progression. It's probably the single most used chord progression. And if you learn it, you will literally know thousands of songs. And beside that, it makes a great jamming vehicle when you get together with other people and you don't know the same songs. You could take the blues and jam on it and play different styles of it, slow, fast, jazz, country, whatever. There are examples of blues in jazz. Charlie Parker did a lot of great jazz tunes. In rock and roll, obviously. In country music, for example, Folsom Prison Blues is a blues. One interesting thing, the blues was so popular back in the teens and 20s of 1900s that they sometimes called a song a blues that wasn't even a blues because they sold so well. But anyways, so what is a blues? Let's imagine you're trying to explain it to someone who had a basic knowledge of music and you want to get across the point. First of all, if you have some basic knowledge of music, you should know that in every key there's 3 main chords. For example, if you're in the key of A, they would be A, B, and E. A is called the 1 chord, obviously, 1A. D is called the 4 chord because it's 4 from A, B, C, D. And E is called the 5 chord. One of our most basic blues goes like this. We stay at the 1 chord for 4 measures. Then we go to the 4 chord for 2 measures. And then back to the 1 chord for 2 measures. Out to the 5 chord, and then back to the 1 chord. Now, that's one of the most basic 12-bar blues. So what a blues is a specific order of that 1-4-5. Generally speaking, staying on the 1 chord for 4 measures, going to the 4 chord for 2 measures, back to the 1 chord for 2 measures, out to the 5, and back to the 1. Now, you will find that even though the blues, this sounds like a contrary statement, but the blues is a very regular chord progression that has a lot of variables. And it does. People do all kinds of things with it. That's why it's a little confusing to people. But it's there's other than the 12-bar blues, but that's what we're talking about today. And there's minor blues and, as I said, jazz blues. Well, we're going to look at some of the most basic blues progressions used in blues and rock. One of the first variations that's very common is what a lot of people call the quick change blues. And that's where instead of staying on the one chord for 4 measures, we go right to the 4 chord and then back to the 1 chord and stay there for the 2 measures. And then on to the 4 chord. And as before, back to the 1 chord. Now, here's something that happens very often. The 5 chord, down to the 4 chord, and back to the 1 chord. And then we throw in a quick 5 at the end. That progression is probably one of the most used manners of playing the blues. Although I will say that a lot of early rock and roll blues use this more basic progression. For example, Rock Around the Clock in the key of A does A6 to D ninth and back to A, and then E ninth and then back to A. So one of the first of rock and roll songs, at least in the popular mode of rock and roll, did that. It stayed at the 5 chord. It didn't go 5 down to 4. A number of songs do that. For example, Johnny Be Good, and a lot of people play it wrong, although that's their prerogative to do what they want with it. His first version, Chuck Berry's first version of Johnny Be Good, was in B flat, which is 1 fret higher than A, so it's B flat, E flat, and F. He actually stayed at B flat for 4, went to the 4 chord for 2, and back to the 1 chord, 5 chord, and back to the 1 chord. He didn't go 5 down to 4, as people often do, and he didn't throw a 5 chord at the end of it. But you can do what you want with the blues, but Chuck Berry's original version in B flat didn't do that. As a matter of fact, a little thing about it, if you listen to the first version of it, it sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, either the piano or somebody did go 5 down to 4, but then you don't hear that again in the song. So it's possible he might have even corrected them during the recording, but he stayed at the 5 chord and then finally went back to the 1. So, but this chord progression here, this is probably one of our most used 12-bar blues, where we stay on the 1 chord for 1 measure, the 4 chord for 1 measure, back to the 1, and we stay there. The 4 chord for 2 measures, and the 1 chord for 2 measures. The 5 chord, down to the 4 chord, and back to the 1 chord. And here's what that would look like specifically in A. Now the next thing, people will often spice these chords up. We could make, it sounds best to often make them all 7th chords. And I'm always telling my students a 9th is just a fancy 7th. So you can make a chord into a 7th, and you could make it into a 9th. A common way of playing a blues, let's say we're in A again, would be to play A 7th to D 9th and back to A 7th. D 9th and back to A 7th. E 9th down to D 9th, A 7, we throw in another quick at the end. Now, the 12-bar blues is used in thousands and thousands of songs that don't even sound like blues. You could think of the song Wipeout. Now, that's a blues progression in the key of C. It uses C, F, and G. Hound Dog, originally by Big Mama Thornton, but made popular by Elvis Presley. Hound Dog is in the key of C, uses C, F, and G. Then we've got all kinds of things. We've got Crossroads by Robert Johnson. We've got Your Mama Don't Dance, Ice Cream Man by Van Halen, The Twist by Chubby Checker. As I said, Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. We got Stormy Monday by T-Bone Walker, Statesboro Blues by the Allman Brothers, Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin, Steamroller Blues by James Taylor and others, Give Me One Reason by Tracy Chapman, Red House by Jimi Hendrix. Hundreds, thousands of songs use the blues. Often you'll find, though, one catches my eye there, Give Me One Reason by Tracy Chapman. She's actually in the key of G flat, and she does her own little thing with it here. Instead of staying on the one chord, she goes to the 4, 5, and then back. So she does a little variation on it, but it's still a 12-bar blues in G flat. Led Zeppelin does, I believe it's You Shook Me. They do, let's see, it's in the key of A. On their first their first album, A Blues in A. And then towards the end, they throw in A, B flat, A, B flat. That's their own device, but it's still a blues in the key of A, 12-bar blues. So the 12-bar blues comes up over and over again. One thing you want to keep in mind, the 12-bar blues does not have to use this rhythm. That rhythm, the shuffle rhythm, is exclusive from the blues. We can have a song that does that does the shuffle rhythm that's not a blues, but very often you hear the shuffle and the blues together. So a lot of people, as soon as they hear this rhythm, they believe it's blues. That's not always the case. You got to listen to the chord sequence to find out if it's really a blues. So we could play the blues very slow. I'll put another turn around. A, D, A, E. That's another thing you can do at the end. So again, the blues is a very versatile chord progression. It is basically one thing that has a lot of variables. So this would be my first video about the 12-bar blues. And then I'll talk about some variations on it, leading right up into some jazz blues. But it'd be very good to have first an understanding of it. There's all kinds of backing tracks on YouTube you could find to jam on the blues. Some of them may use this quick change blues, some of them the 5 down to 4, other variations which you'll get into. But right now, this is probably our most basic blues. Here it is in the key of A, although of course it could be done in any key. So you should at least be able to do this first. I would say more often than not, make your chords into 7ths. Major chords don't give off as much of a blues sound. I would make them into 7ths, and maybe the 4 and the 5 chord, even make them into 9th chords to get more of a blues sound. So this is Bob Piorun. This is my first installment on the basic 12-bar blues, and I'll get into some other things on it as we go on. Thanks.